I'd like to welcome everyone to Coffee with EMBL, the very first online Zoom coffee meeting for the entire EMBL community around the world. Thank you so much for coming along. This is a time to have some coffee, so I have my EMBL mug and my caffeine symbol in the background here just to remind us what we're doing. And this is a pilot for what may become a more regular event as a chance to bring the community together to discuss issues that are affecting us all, opportunities as well. And I was very honest. My name's Angus Lamond. I hope you can see that on the screen. Some of you will know me. For those who don't, hello. For those who do know me, nice to see you again, and a great chance to link up with some very dear old friends who I've known for many years. I am an alumnus from EMBL. I was at EMBL Heidelberg. I'm trying to remember that in 1987 till 1995. Although I've tried to keep in touch beyond that. And some of you will have overlapped with me when I was there, or perhaps met me in other occasions. But if not, hello. I think we're drawn together at a time here as a community, which I must say I never expected to happen. I'm just finishing my 4th week of isolation, although I feel fortunately perfectly healthy and well. My family as well. I never expected we would be in this situation. And I know that that's also a time that affects many of us. I've had a few points when I've felt a bit glum and unhappy about the situation, but also determined to look to the most positive outcomes that we can get. So I think this is a great chance as a community for us to stay together, to build bridges between ourselves, share some common experiences of what's happening, and talk about how we can also emerge in future from this stronger. And one of the things I wanted to say was that I find it remarkable how in this time of crisis, government, certainly our government in the UK and other governments around the world, almost unanimously say that they are turning to science to find the answers. So I see that as also one of the great opportunities for us as we have an ongoing dialogue with our governments and funding agencies to politely remind them of how important science is to our societies and our ability to cope with the unexpected. And this is certainly one of the most unexpected situations. I think science does have a major role to play in how we can hope to emerge from this successfully. And that's going to be one of the themes I think we'll touch on as we go around. So as people are coming in and joining, Peter, could you just put up the map that you put together and maybe show that for everyone? See if Peter can share that. This is a map just really showing that we have registered for the meeting today a quite remarkable cross-section of the globe. Scientists and alumni from all over the world, obviously from all the major European countries, also from North America, South America, I believe as well, Ethiopia. I'd like to shout out to Africa, from Asia, from Australia. We're going to be hearing from Australia a little bit later on. This was just a remarkable response, and again, I think shows what a remarkable community that we have established around the world. Okay, so what we're going to do today, and this is very much a pilot for how we might organize this in the future. We want to get your feedback and comments about what would be good to do in the future. But the first thing I'd like to do is to invite my friend Matthias Hentze to join in and tell us something about how EMBL as an organization are responding to the current lockdown situation, the view from Heidelberg and Germany, and the ways in which people at EMBL are responding to the current epidemic. Matthias.
Yes, so first of all, a very warm welcome to every one of you from our home garden in Heidelberg. I'm in seclusion at home. It doesn't look like it, I guess, from my background. I'll say something about my background a little later. I guess because I've overlapped with many people, that a good number of you will know me. For those who don't, I joined EMBL as a group leader, then in the gene expression program in 1989, and I'm still at EMBL, and I have a particular connection to alumni relations, which makes this even more of a pleasure. I want to thank very, very warmly Angus for having very spontaneous and quickly agreed to do so. I think that we are together here, spanning the globe, as Angus said, hopefully all healthy. I hope all of you and your families, etc., are healthy. I happen to know that not everyone on this call has been. I hope for those of you who have not been, that you're recovering or have recovered. Yeah, so I think, while this has many downsides, many of us feel a bit isolated, feel a bit lonely. We have a person who celebrates a special birthday today, who can't have a birthday party as was planned. There are many, many things how our lives have changed. Many of them, unfortunately, not to the better. I think there are also some good aspects. One of them is that having actually this coffee at EMBL was triggered by the corona crisis. It was sort of in the books for a long time, but corona actually made it happen. So not all is negative, even though I know that for all of us, we feel that the balance clearly is. And I also have to say that while most people I know find the situation hard, I think many of us know of many, many other people, not necessarily in the personal environment, who are suffering much, much harder from this, health-wise, economically, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think with a strong sense of community, which I think in particular for me, the EMBL alumni family represents, it makes it less difficult to get through this. So, Angus?
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, Matthias, and are there direct actions that the EMBL lab is participating in Heidelberg to help deal with the current situation?
Yeah, so I just quickly wanted to say that, as you know by now, EMBL has 6 sites across Europe. We first went into shutdown at EMBL Rome because, as you know, within Europe, Italy and Spain are particularly badly affected and were affected early. But at the moment, all of EMBL, the whole organization, is in shutdown mode. We are thinking about how to get back into a reopening, a gradual and careful reopening. Dates have not been decided, but I anticipate that the first sites will do that relatively soon. As soon as the shutdown happened, and it was most important to secure everyone's health and to secure the sites and the animals and so on. But once that had happened, and even while that was still happening, people were asking, how can we help? And it was really quite a broad response from many. Actually, Nuj was extremely helpful in setting up a volunteering possibility within EMBL for many things. And I assume that applies to many of you, maybe not to all of you. But it certainly also applies to EMBL that we weren't prepared for anything like this. So many, many things had to be done on the fly. Many people worked very long hours to make it happen. But fortunately, as far as EMBL is concerned, I can say we've really gone through this so far, touch wood, quite without any really bad things happening. So we have set up a volunteering program because in Germany the healthcare system has actually coped much better than at the very beginning people were fearing. So at the very beginning there was a call for people to identify themselves as potential volunteers, etc. None of this was within Germany called upon. And so this availability for volunteering has not at least been called upon within Germany. At EMBL, we have very quickly tried to see how, as a research organization, can we contribute to efforts to fight Corona. And Angus, you pointed out that it is positive to see how many politicians recognize the important role of science in this. So, as you can imagine, the first things that we were able to do were through EMBL EBI, providing databases and information. And just at the beginning of this week, actually, EMBL EBI was a major contributor to the Corona COVID forum that the EU launched. Then some of our core facilities have been reopened, and some special research projects have been especially approved on special permission exemptions from the shutdown that are directed towards helping with diagnosis, better diagnosis, or potential treatment options in Corona. So while EMBL is still in shutdown, there is a good number of EMBL scientists that try to be helpful from within the laboratory even, and many others from the outside. So maybe I stop here again, thanking all of you around the world. I can see now it's 45 who have joined. I look forward to having this coffee with you. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Matthias, and great to know that you're well, and that Heidelberg, as I'm not surprised, is responding to requests for help. I mean, I think there's so many uncertainties and so many frustrations around the situation that we find ourselves in. I don't know how many people online saw this coming. We could have a vote on that. We could test out the voting. I will certainly start off. So if you click on participants, you will see a chance to say yes or no at the bottom. And I'm going to click on no. And this will actually count up because I have to say, I obviously was aware of what was happening in China, but I did not imagine it was going to have the implications for us that it did anytime soon. So it just shows how rapidly life can change. And there have been so many dark and unhappy things about this, but that there have been some positives as well. And if I could also on a personal level say, one tiny thing my wife and I have been able to do is to volunteer in our local community food bank to help some of the people less fortunate than ourselves, make sure they remain well fed and have food available, especially older people who are vulnerable. And something else that's been happening in the UK, and I was discussing this with Noosh recently, but at a national level, one of the things that has happened in the UK is that once a week at 8 p.m., actually it was yesterday on Thursday evenings, everybody goes outside and applauds the health workers for doing this. And I have to say, yesterday evening, it was quite touching to see every single person on our street spontaneously went out and had 5 minutes of applause. And obviously, in a practical sense, it doesn't do a lot, but in terms of making people feel part of the community and supportive of each other, I can see that as a great positive in a situation where otherwise we are so busy that we don't find time to speak to our neighbors. So I don't know if that's something that's also happening in other countries, but again, perhaps people could just record that if similar things are going on. And I think one of the real positives from this event today is just capturing vignettes of personal experiences in all our different countries around the world. I think that will be a very useful thing we can do as we think about emerging successfully from the crisis and preparing ourselves better for any crisis that might happen in the future. I'd like to bring in James Sharpe now from Barcelona. James, hello, how are you?
Hi, good, yes. Can you hear me okay? Is it okay?
Yeah, we can hear you fine. Perhaps you could just say a few words about yourself and your involvement with EMBL and the perspective from Barcelona.
Absolutely. So this is a alumni event. So welcome to everyone. I'm very happy to be here. I've been in many Zoom meetings over the last few weeks. I don't think I've reached 143 before, so that's very impressive. Actually, with the voting, I have to say, so 4 or 5 people claimed that they did predict this happening. I guess there's this interesting topic of super predictors now, humans that can get things right. We should find out who those were. So my name is James Sharpe. I'm in a way the furthest away from an alumnus, I hope, in a way, because I've only joined EMBL relatively recently, just over 2 years ago, which was when the site in Barcelona started. I am a developmental biologist and systems biologist and computer modeler by training. And in fact, I was previously at the CRG, which is where Fatima Gebauer is, who is also here joining us, and moved over to EMBL just over a couple of years ago. So, I mean, yes, time is short, but basically, I mean, Spain has been particularly hard hit. And although I would like, as we all, I think, to try to look for the silver linings and the positive sides, which I will mention, but, we can't basically avoid the fact that many countries, but Spain has been very hard hit, and it's been, very sad and difficult to watch this at times. However, there have been positive things. I mean, we have seen that EMBL is a wonderful organization. Our unit here in Barcelona is young and new and small. So for us, it's sort of still new and interesting to see what EMBL really is. And EMBL in these particular times has been really wonderful. Regarding sort of communication, I think the main point is, I don't want to go on about everything, but so communication seems an interesting topic to me. It's what we're doing right now with Zoom. Of course, the technology for this has been around for quite a long time. There are discussions a lot about how we maybe could reduce travel, but also how we need to interact more. And I think one of the hurdles has been a kind of a cultural one, that, we don't feel as comfortable doing what we're doing now than sitting face to face. But it is partly a cultural one. We're forced to do it now. We've been forced to do it for weeks. And this has some very interesting dimensions for me in EMBL itself as well. EMBL, as you all know, is a distributed organization. It's on 6 sites across 5 countries. And there is, this interesting issue of people who can get together physically in a room to sit around a table versus when people have to join from the different sites via video conferencing. This has been a sort of a discussion going on for quite a while. All of a sudden, everyone is at home sitting in front of their screens, and we're all, in some sense, kind of equal. It's kind of interesting that, as an observation. I hope that this might lead to some, discussions as we go back as to changes in how we communicate. As other examples, I mean, I say we're a small unit. We only have 40 people so far. We're growing fast. But 2 people, for various reasons, were not physically in Barcelona when this whole shutdown happened, and were in their own countries. What's interesting about this is that they are as integrated in our lab meetings, our unit meetings, our coffee breaks from other countries as the ones who are physically in Barcelona. We're all stuck in little boxes, or, many are stuck in really quite small apartments in Barcelona. But our 2 students who happen to be in other countries are giving lab presentations, presenting their work, presenting their analysis at a group meeting, a unit meeting with 40 people, as if we were all together. So this is not how we want to go forwards, of course, but I think this sort of cultural change, because it's not a technological change. We had this technology around for ages, but we're kind of learning how to cope with it a bit better, how to communicate better through this technology. And I do think this is very interesting and hopefully sort of very positive for the future, that it carries on a bit.
Can I ask you then, James, because I think this is, you've touched on a point that I'm sure everyone connecting with this meeting has experienced and thought about. I actually think, although you could say the technology's been around for a while, I think we do miss out on a lot if we can't physically get together, because some of the interesting interactions come over a glass of wine or a coffee or something that you miss out on. But there's been quite a lot of interactions and meetings over the years that have frustrated me. If I, for example, have to attend a 1-hour meeting in London, that's almost 1,000 miles round trip for me. That takes an entire day for something that maybe only lasts 60 or 90 minutes. Huge amount of extra carbon footprint. All the guilt I have to take for all that carbon I'm putting into the environment. And what is amazing is not that it's a substitute for all interactions, but how many types of meetings can successfully take place remotely. And I think if this epidemic had happened even 3 or 4 years ago, many of us just wouldn't have had. I mean, I upgraded my home broadband 2 years ago, and that's made a massive difference. You know, Netflix, so much better now, but also the ability to have events like this. And I think so if I look for any sort of grasp at any sort of straw for a silver lining, it's that I'm glad this epidemic didn't happen a few years ago, because we are able to connect so much better. And my question to you, and actually to everyone participating, if you would comment on this, is I don't think we're ever going back to the way it was before. I think a certain type of meeting now, we've shown technically there is no reason why it can't successfully go ahead. I took part in a serious scientific review committee. There may be some people online who are on that meeting that involved 4 different countries all taking part, and a very serious sort of evaluation. And I have to say, it worked really well.
Yes,
I don't see us going back to how it was before.
So, well, indeed. I mean, so this is basically the point that I was trying to allude to. I think that, so you're right that there have been technological improvements that are helping this. But I think for me, the interesting thing is that it is maybe more a cultural shift than a technological one. We just haven't wanted to do it because it doesn't seem as nice. And we will not want to restrict ourselves to this for sure. But I think the energy barrier for engaging be happy to engage in this way has been reduced a bit. And even if it's just a sort of proportional thing, we should be able to do less physical traveling as a result of this. Not eliminate it, but we should be able to cope in this way more. And indeed, if we're looking for silver linings for what is not a positive story at all, this can be one of them. What I wanted to mention, as I think most units in many places, we are still having, our lab meetings every week. All the labs are having lab meetings. We have unit meetings. We have virtual coffees, and it's not a substitute, but it's very important in these times. And I think it's contributing to a cultural change that will last. I should say on a technical note, because of the importance of communication, because you can't sort of relax on this, it's very important. So we have our weekly unit meeting in 5 minutes, and this is why I unfortunately will have to leave, because keeping the frequency, the weekly frequency of these events within the group, I think is sort of psychologically very important. So I'm afraid I will have to leave in a few minutes on that basis. And the other final point, you mentioned the 8 p.m. thing. I'm sure Fatima will also comment on this, but here in Spain, this has not been weekly, this has been daily. And it is indeed a very important symbol and sort of opportunity and moment for, reflection and supporting and all these things. And indeed, the terrible event has somehow managed to bring some positives into the thing, the way that people connect with each other. Yeah.
I realised that James wasn't able to stay for the full meeting. I'm very pleased that you were able to join us. Thank you very much indeed. And we're going to move then from Barcelona to Italy and to Rome and to Cornelius and ask how are things going at EMBL in Monteretondo, and what's the perspective from Italy?
Yeah, so first of all, it's great to be part of this. It's lovely to see so many people, and I also see a number of people from alumni from EMBL Rome, which is great. the situation in Italy was, I mean, you've all followed that, I think. We were the first European country sort of to be faced with this onslaught, let's say. And I remember, well, you were asking whether we were predicting it or not. I remember having a staff meeting. Phil Avener, at the time was the head of the unit, myself, called a staff meeting. And we had basically decided we were going to shut down the site, and nobody could believe us. I mean, we had a meeting all of EMBL, and people were saying, no, this can't be happening. And I think we were telling them, no, I think this is a bit more serious than what we originally thought. We had a staff meeting, and that day we decided to shut down. And the next day, the Italian government then also decided to shut down. This is the whole, the shutdown that happened across most of Italy. So if I think back at that moment, it did seem really unreal. And yet now it has this strange permanence to it almost. And luckily, we're starting to talk about coming out now and seeing how we might do that. I think the next phase will be, we really don't know what's coming next. I think it'll be very interesting to see how we handle this coming out, under what circumstances. There's big discussions in EMBL right now, under what circumstances should we open different sites and so forth. So, and I think it's not so clear. It's almost less clear when to open than it is when to shut down. Otherwise, I think, in terms of EMBL Rome, our staff, we have about 100 people here. I think they're doing quite well. But in contact with them, having staff meetings, and there's people are obviously students and postdocs are busy learning, computer languages, dealing with data. These days, luckily, biology has become so data heavy that you can do an experiment for 2 days and you can have data for 3 months to analyze. So that also, it means that most of the people actually are really doing, they're doing analysis. They're really doing their research work. Lots of people are distracted by families and kids and so on. So I think there's sort of, partial productivity. And in fact, I remember at the beginning telling my team, I told them, I said, look, if you don't do anything during this whole time, but you manage to do one other thing that you've never done before in your life, I will be perfectly happy with that. So people, I talk to each of them individually, and people have they're kind of personal relationship and solutions to the moment, I think. We've had to do some things for mental health. I don't know if that's something that was quite interesting. We actually set up a hotline 2 weeks ago with an external provider that staff can call at any time of day or night, and that's been used already. So that's really nice. Makes me feel better too, that I know that people have support. And in Italy, like everywhere at EMBL, most of the staff are not from Italy. Most of the staff are students and trainees and postdocs, and they're often alone here. They're living alone, many of them, and they're suddenly alone in a house in a country, so they have multiple levels of feeling isolated, I think. So I think that was one of the really acute responses we had, particularly in the beginning, the first 2 or 3 weeks.
I mean, obviously you if I can put it in these terms, you led the way for Europe in terms of what was happening with the epidemic in Italy. I think you're right in saying that getting into it wasn't so much the issue as how we get out of it. And I think there are a whole range of issues around that. And my feeling from my own experience so far, but I really would like you to comment and everybody else to comment as well from the different countries, is for a few weeks, actually it's not so bad. To be honest, I have a confession to make publicly. I had to cancel a lot of travel arrangements, and my feeling was actually one of relief. It was, thank goodness, I don't have to fit in all this bloody, travel and going through airports again for a few weeks. And actually, I've got time to catch up with stuff that I really was wanting to do, that I should have done, review things, write up some papers and do stuff. And I think for many of us, for 4 or 5 weeks, maybe even 2 months, that's okay. But I worry that going much beyond that, we're already at the stage, in our group meetings where we review some new results from the data and think that's really cool. And then you think, these are the experiments we need to do now. Let's get and do that and say, oh, actually, we won't be doing those experiments anytime soon. And I would find it easier if I knew that we could not do experiments before whichever date you want to pick. Let's say the end of July or the end of August or the end of June. the real frustration for me is having no idea whether it's going to be 4 more weeks, 8 more weeks, 12 more weeks. That's really hard to imagine. And I think there are a whole range of issues to do with people's careers, commitments, where are they going to go next, what to do. So I don't know if you could comment on that. I mean, is there an exit plan that seems realistic in Italy?
I mean, I think we're all waiting. This week, there should be some more clarity on the plans of the government. I have to say, my personal reading now, I'm not an Italian. I grew up in the United States, but I've been living here for quite a long time. I mean, my personal reading is that they've done actually quite a good job, I think, in listening to scientists and getting technical advice on how to both go in and I think now come out. So the strategy really seems pretty sensible. We're supposed to get more information. I mean, the other people who are in Italy online probably know maybe even more than I do. I mean, we're supposed to get more information this week. And then in the beginning of May, we'll see. My assumption is sometime in May, probably will open up. But it will be a different world. I mean, in some sense, it's easy when you're at home, you're with your family, but going back to our regular habits in this altered world of social distancing will be really interesting. I think everybody's already thinking about what that's going to look like. It's going to be very different. And right today, I'm in the lab actually here. I'm at EMBL, and we're actually here with my technician and lab manager to actually measure distances between chairs and put tape on the floor and, make sure that people, when they come back, are not places to sit. We're going to use some of the video conferencing rooms, actually small seminar rooms, as desk space. We're going to use one empty lab of a group leader who just left, Paul Heppenstall. I think, I don't know if any of these people are around. We're going to be using your lab. There's a little bit of extra space. So somehow we'll make it work, but it will be different. This is not the end. Coming back is not the end.
I would really like to get input from other people. And again, I apologize that I'm very much an amateur at doing this job, and it's also a first for me on the technological front. So I would like to get a few people have a chance to come in, and I do encourage you to put comments down. Is Marco Bianchi available? Would you like to comment here, Marco, on the situation?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can. Hello.
Okay. Hello. So, I would also like to give a comment from Italy. I live in Milano, and for all of you who don't know me, I often love to be dissenting. So, for me, the whole thing is not going very well, because Italy has been caught essentially unaware of this problem. It didn't see it coming. And the first responses to the problem were disastrous. There were a lot of mistakes being made in public policy and in health policy. This could be, to some extent, be excused because it was very new to everyone. We did not expect this to happen like this. After all, this is a kind of a respiratory illness that has dire consequences for only a tiny minority of people. But the fact is that it spread so fast, that so many people hit the hospitals that the entire health system got completely knocked out. So this was a big problem, and response was a little bit hasty. We did this in too much haste. So the country has been locked down for 5 weeks, and I would say that 5 weeks is a very long time. Because after 5 weeks, living together in small spaces with small kids, or as many Italians do, even with elder parents, is very difficult. And also, the whole economic activity has collapsed. So this is going to cost a huge amount of money, made worse by the fact that the entire country is locked down, even pieces of a country that have had a rather small impact by the COVID epidemic. It's not the whole country that was hit. It was essentially Lombardy and northern Italy. So this is really very bad in a way. And there are silver linings, but the silver linings themselves have limits. Because we have been keeping in contact by video conferences like this. We have had virtual lab meetings and so on. But after 5 weeks, all the data you could analyze, you have analyzed. And you have to do things. And you cannot do things in the kitchen of your apartment. So this is a big limitation, and keep it in mind. You can go on for weeks, 4 weeks. The 5th week is already very happy.
Thank you, Marco. So Marco and I are old friends also, and alumni who shared our time at EMBL at the same time. I'd like to bring in Fatima, who's the present head of the EMBL Alumni Association. Fatima, how are you doing?
Hello everyone.
Could you tell us something about your perspective from Barcelona? We've already heard something, but perhaps also from Spain in general, because Spain, I'm aware, is one of the first European countries who were hit hard by the crisis.
Yes, exactly. Well, let me first greet everyone. Thank you for being here in this, we are living absolutely exceptional times, and this is a test for all of us. I hope you're all doing good and you're healthy, you and your families and your relatives, and that they keep being healthy for a long time. So as Angus said, in Spain, of course, the crisis and the disease has hit very, very badly. It's one of the worst countries in Europe to suffer the disease together with Italy. And we have been under confinement also for already 5 weeks. First, only in the first, I think, 2 weeks, only essential work was permitted, whatever, an essentiality was defined by the government. Then we have been also a couple of weeks of complete shutdown, and now we are in a week of as we were before, only essential work permitted. So at the CRG, where I am, the Center for Genomic Regulation, so now we are slowly going back, as I said, only for the essential work. From the very beginning of the pandemic, there was a crisis committee formed that contacted the local and national authorities, and we have offered our help, and now they have taken this seriously, and now we are actually being mobilized, and we're doing all types of things. So one of the things we're doing is PCR tests for the local hospitals and the elderly residencies. We are also producing materials for, PCR tests for other people or for other institutions, or also, viral proteins for serological tests. We are also providing advice. We are also doing, a number of COVID-related research projects have been approved. And we are part, of a brainstorming committee to try to speed up to have easy tests for the corona. So, all in all, this is what we are doing in a nutshell on the scientific part of it. The crisis committee also deals with any situation related to this crisis at the CRG, from who is allowed to come in or not, when, how the whole thing is organized inside the CRG, how the contacts with the authorities and hospitals and relevant stakeholders are, and also how psychological, help, for example, is organized as well, because, under this situation, as it has been already said, there are people that have their families there and they're not alone. There are other people that are that don't have anyone around and that they feel more lonely. So I don't want to take too much time. I just want to say that even though we've been really hit as a country, we are also, it's very nice to see how people have joined to try to cope with the pandemic. There are, at the CRG, there are more than half of the CRG have volunteered for doing all this PCR testing in the neighborhoods. This thing of clapping to the nurses and doctors and even cleaning ladies happens every day at 8. There have been even orchestras. It's amazing. Music bands, opera, everything, even shows, magician shows, from balcony to balcony. It's incredible how the whole thing is, the way we communicate and the way I mean, to also it's a way of relieving the stress that happens for all people that feel, kind of isolated. So I think this is actually good. This pandemic is also bringing up the good within each one of us. And if I may raise one issue, I'm really very interested in knowing how in the different countries this return or deconfinement, this return to normality is being planned, because I think this is very different. I mean, there are lots of issues here on how to go back to normal.
I think that, so thank you very much, Fatima. I think that's a key point. I think testing is absolutely key to an exit strategy. We don't know when a vaccine is going to arrive, and one of the problems has been around doing this. And I'd like to bring in now Keith Stanley, who is an EMBL alumnus now in Australia, who's built a very successful company which is actually creating test kits to detect the virus, and who can perhaps tell us something about this. Keith, are you available?
Yes, I am. So I was a staff scientist and then a group leader starting in about 1980. And after I left EMBL, I got a research job in Sydney in Australia, and I did research for about 15 years. And then I started up a diagnostic company because we got very involved with some genomic screening for expression screening, and then PCR analysis. And we devised a way of doing semi-quantitative multiplexed PCR with limitless numbers of targets. So we thought this was something that maybe the community should benefit from, and if we didn't develop it, then no one would. So basically that was about 14 years ago. So of course we watch things like pandemics very closely, and the flu every year and so on. So we actually designed tests on the 12th of January when the first sequence came out. And we had an assay by the 31st of January. We were testing clinical samples. And then that was a CE mark test by the 23rd of March. So we're really in the thick of it. So our staff are all at work. In fact, they're working 2 shifts, 7 days a week, producing kits for people. We make about 200,000 tests a month for Australia, and about 100,000 tests per month in London, where we also manufacture. They're used around Europe and around Asia. So we've been in the thick of it. And as we were just hearing, it's actually been wonderful how other small companies have helped out, how governments got involved. We have a weekly telephone hookup with the state governments in 2 of the states here. And I think it's something similar in London as well, just to deal with the health officials with their next plan in the pandemic to try and make things as smooth as possible.
Keith, if I could ask you, so first of all, congratulations. I think that's fantastic. And another thing it would be great for us to record is how the Alumni Society, if you don't mind us taking some credit for your achievements, are contributing so positively for taking us out of this hole. I mean, as an outsider to the testing issues, just watching this unfold, it was clear that in some countries, not only were the number of testing kits, I think, limiting and still are, so not enough people could be tested. But as I understand it, I think in North America and maybe in some other places, faulty tests were put in place. And we keep hearing through the media all sorts of issues surrounding about, is the right test being used? Is it sufficiently accurate and precise? Could you maybe just very briefly share with us what are the real challenges and difficulties, and why are we finding it so hard as a world to deal with this?
Yeah, well, a lot of it's supply chain. So all countries try and have the minimum amount of stock so that you can be as efficient as possible as a company. But that doesn't work in a pandemic because each country closes its borders. And even if you can purchase something somewhere else, there are no flights to bring it here. So we actually make some extractor equipment from source parts in Taiwan. We have parts which are made in China. and they're very hard to get. So that's one of the cooperations we've been doing with government, is to actually set up local manufacturing for things like extraction kits. So we have in 4 weeks developed our own extraction materials, which we're launching next week in a manual method, so that laboratories which can't source automatic kits now have a way of still extracting the nucleic acid out of it, so they can continue testing. So yeah, that's been a real challenge, is just a supply chain issue. And I think a lot of governments, that's one of the ways our world will change, is that a lot of governments will insist on having local supply. And I think they'll be very suspicious of putting too much weight on Chinese supply, given how difficult it's been through this epidemic. And, we all want things cheaper, but cheaper isn't good in a pandemic. You want things that are local and available.
So can you offer us a message of hope as regards going forward? Because my understanding is that, we're all praying for an effective vaccine or antiviral to suddenly be available. But my understanding, and please people should comment if I'm wrong, is that in Europe, or the information suggests that actually a relatively low fraction of our population so far has actually been infected, and that perhaps the reduction in infections per day is reflecting the fact that lockdown has been quite brutal and somewhat effective. Yes. But the implication is, as soon as we leave again our houses, the virus will start infecting again.
Yep. Can you let me share my screen, Angus? I don't know if that's possible.
Peter, can you do that?
Anyway, what I was just going to say is that
you can do.
Yeah, it's very different in different countries. So what's happened in Australia, which is what I was going to show you, is quite different from other places. So I don't know whether people can see that, but because in Australia action was taken very early on, in fact, the number of infections was limited to about 6,000, of which about 5,000 have recovered, and we only have a handful of people every day. But I think this gives a second problem, and that is that most of the Australian population is naive immunologically, maybe other ways as well. And so this means that Australia can't open its borders. So if anyone's planning a holiday in Australia, I should put your plans back at least 12 months, because I think it's, we've never made a vaccine against the common cold. So it might be that we can't develop an effective vaccine. So what we might be relying on is good treatments, which is why I think the cell and molecular biology of these viruses is going to be really important, because a treatment is maybe a better target than trying to go for a vaccine. And I was seeing the other day some aptamer research, which might look helpful there. So there are all sorts of avenues we can go, but the more we know about the molecular and cell biology, the more likely we are to be able to combat these sorts of pandemics.
Thanks, Keith. I think that's a great point to come back to from more or less where we started. So again, I also want to thank you for agreeing to come and share this with us. I know it's evening for you, so I've switched to the view from out my window from yesterday evening, where we've been very fortunate here in Scotland to enjoy some spectacular sunsets over the last few days. So thank you for joining us. But, Keith, you're making the point, just as we started in our discussion, that science has to be the way out of this. And that's, we don't know yet exactly how to apply the science. We don't even know what we need to know about the virus. This is something that I think for most of us, except for, I think there were 2 or 3 people on the panel who saw it coming. But for the rest of us, and most of the nations and countries, we didn't expect this. If anyone was expecting a pandemic, we probably thought it was going to be a new version of flu. But we, our need to understand basic cell and molecular biology, which is what EMBL is all about, has never been stronger. And one of the other things we haven't talked about yet today, but I think is a really important issue. I'd be very interested to know what people's views are. I'm also very worried, apart from the health implications for the world, because this virus probably for many of us would not be as serious a health risk. The real danger is overwhelming our health systems. But the resulting economic damage that has likely to emerge from this, in the UK, I'm terribly worried about what effect this will have. And I think one of the worst outcomes would be if there's a deep recession caused by the steps that were taken to protect all of us from the effects of the epidemic. If that leads our governments to say, well, we better cut back, things we don't need. And I just hope that doesn't include science funding. I wonder if anyone would like to share any comments. Matthias, could I ask you to come back in on that point from EMBL's perspective? I mean, is this a great opportunity for science to suddenly say, give us more funding, or more of a risk that the economic impact that may arise from this will actually lead to less funding?
Hard to say. I would quite honestly see the risks bigger than the opportunities. I think the degree to which science can help is evident, and it's evident to politicians. I think now, to stabilize economies, a lot of money is being spent, and at some point that money needs to be retrieved again. And I fear that there is a danger that at least in some countries, probably most countries, science may be suffering rather than gaining. I hope I'm wrong. But if you ask for my honest opinion, that's my worry. I think that maybe, on the side of philanthropy, people will realize even more strongly the importance of science, and maybe, making cases to support particularly science projects that are in support of societal needs, such as combating infections, perhaps environmental issues, etc. Maybe it is slightly easier to make those arguments in the upcoming future. But when it comes to governmental funding, I'm quite honestly not super optimistic.
I mean, I'd like to invite people. I mean, obviously, the time is rapidly running down. I'm amazed how fast the time has gone past. There's so much more that could be said. I would really like people to add some comments, and we will try to create a forum where the discussion can continue and where contributions can continue. And I do want to apologize again that for purely logistical and technical reasons, it wasn't possible to bring in as many people to directly contribute to the debate. This was seen as a pilot for future events. I really hope that we can find a way to make the argument better. I must admit, I started off this morning a little bit depressed, having received a phone call from a good friend in England, who one of the very large universities in England, where they're talking about very large-scale redundancy because of the economic impact. And of course, this is the contradiction between needing science to train the people who can go and, like Keith, start new companies or go and work for companies like Keith's, and where the government wants to be informed and led by the science, but that requires there being a strong science base that's robust and flexible enough to respond to these challenges. And I would really like to hear the views from this community going round as to how we can better make those arguments. And indeed, one of the suggestions I would have is that if we have another of these events, that we try hard to invite on to the discussion some senior figure from perhaps the European science funding institutions who could take questions from you and perhaps talk to these very issues to understand how that's going on. So there's very little time left. I would like to ask one last question to see if you would be willing to vote on. I realize it was a pilot, it was an experiment. There's a lot of things we could do differently. But if you would like another of these events in future, please vote yes or no, and we will take your information into account. I say it's been a privilege for me to be able to help with this, and I really have enjoyed interacting with everyone, and I hope you enjoyed the coffee. Sorry we couldn't provide it, and I hope you will all stay safe, and I look forward to catching up again in future events. So stay safe and thank you very much indeed.